quick. Well, today I am going to finish a topic I did a little while back, and that is about grace. And I'm going to attempt to, not attempt, I'll give you my definition I've come up with. But more specifically, the Greek word charis, which, grace is one of those words I feel like has a lot of meaning. It's kind of like a religiously charged word. And when used in a religious context, I feel like it's somewhat hard to define. So anyway, I was going to take a stab at it. In the King James, which the reason I reference that is my concordance is based on the King James, so it's a lot easier just to do that. But the English word grace always comes from the Greek word charis, no exceptions. Except one exception. I forgot. James 1:11, it does speak of the beauty of a flower, but that's the only exception. Going the other way, the Greek word charis is translated from a number of different words. And some of the more relevant ones are favor, gift, and thanks. Now, here's a very, very related or important question to my entire topic here. And as a prelude to that question, I'll contrast the word mercy, which is a similar concept to grace. God certainly can be said to be a God of mercy. But there's nothing mysterious about the word at all. Men can have mercy on other men, or animals even. The concept of mercy is the same whether you apply it to men or to God. So there's nothing, nobody debates what mercy means. Did the New Testament writers view charis the same way? The charis, did they view it as charis the same way it was used in everyday speech around them? Or were they trying to describe something mysterious, something a hard to define quality of God that didn't have a word in Greek? So they took the closest thing they had, which was charis. In essence, were they defining a new word, essentially, but with charis, or giving charis a new distinct meaning? Honestly, I really don't know. It could go either way. But I have taken the approach that it's the first one, that they were just using it in the way that it was used already. And it has become a mysterious type word since then, grace. But I don't think that was the original intention. If I'm wrong about that, all of my conclusions are completely wrong. Now, the individual points, I think, are going to be correct because, I'm pointing out verses in the Bible. But anyway, so let's first look at charis outside the New Testament. So a big influence on the New Testament writers was the Septuagint, which, as probably everyone knows, is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And charis was used quite a bit there. And I'll just mention a couple places. So in Proverbs 22:1, and this obviously came out of the Old Testament, it says, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. Loving favor, translated as charis, rather than silver and gold." And then the New International Version gives that same verse, says, "To be esteemed, charis, is better than silver or gold." So Ecclesiastes 9:11, and the New American Standard says, "I saw again under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors, and neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor," which is charis, "to the skillful, for time and chance overtake them all." So we have it where esteem and then favor is both used as meanings for charis from the Old Testament. Now, Psalms 45:2 is a slightly different connotation where it meant beauty or pleasant speech. And so this psalm is a song, which of course psalms are songs, celebrating the marriage of a king or a prince. And this one also probably has dual symbolism with the future Masonic king. But anyway, and this is the New American Standard, says, "You are the most handsome of the sons of mankind. Grace," which came from Charis, "is poured upon your lips. Therefore God has blessed you forever." So in that sense, grace is kind of like, we think of a graceful person in that sense. Now, Google's AI Gemini says that so switching over to other uses in Greek, which, but they didn't have books like we have now, but the books did reflect everyday speech some. So it said that it had these connotations, the word charis had these connotations in just secular Greek. It had the concept of beauty and charm, which was also in that Psalm 42 verse, where it denoted a pleasant appearance, loveliness, or agreeableness. Luke 4:22 also, which obviously is the New Testament Greek, charis is portrayed in that same way in Luke 4:22. It meant a favorable attitude or goodwill. And then, like in a phrase, when you find favor with someone. And then kindness and benefit. It could refer to a kind deed, an act of beneficence, or benefit freely given. I think those last two in particular are relevant to what I feel like it meant to the New Testament writers. Now, the word charis, I feel this is relevant to the actual meaning, it is a noun, but it's taken from the verb, I guess it's chairo, chairo, which Strong's defines as a prime verb to be cheerful. So the root verb it comes from is to be cheerful, calmly happy, or well off, and then it was used as a salutation such as be well. A couple of related words, nouns, are charisma and chara, and that's gift and joy, as translated in the New Testament. And they're also from that same verb. So that kind of leads me to think charis will be something similar to those two things, but a little different, since it's a different word. Since it comes from the verb cheer, maybe it means something along the lines of cheerfulness, just based on that alone, the noun version of a verb. Okay, so this has taken me several months, but I have looked at every single verse that charis was in, and I didn't count them, but it's got to be over 100. It's a bunch. Thankfully, I'm not going to come close to giving you that many here today. And to me, there is no simple one definition that covers them all. So that kind of muddies the water a little bit, I suppose. But, and just in categorizing them, I came up with 17 different categories of scriptures that they were in. I'm not going to give you all 17 either. But I'll hit most of them. Now, some of my categories don't help much in terms of defining what it is. And to give you an example of what I mean, in 1 Timothy 1:2, it's used as a salutation. To Timothy, a true son in the faith, grace, mercy, and peace be from God, our Father, and Jesus Christ our Lord. Other than knowing it's something good, similar to mercy and peace, it doesn't really tell you what grace is in that sense. And similar to that, it's used in the phrase such as Spirit of grace, throne of grace, as in Hebrews 4:16, where it says, Hebrews 4:16, let us come boldly to the throne of grace. Well, again, that doesn't tell us. It's something that's a quality of God, but it doesn't really tell us too much about what it is. Um, so so with the bunches of connotations there are, I feel like the root connotation is the favorable attitude or goodwill. Another word for it could be benevolence. So, so consider this verse, Hebrews 2, 9. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, for the suffering of death crowned with honor, that he, by the grace of God, might taste death for everyone. I feel like this is all might be the most important verse as far as my understanding of what grace is. Jesus, the whole plan of salvation was due to the grace of God. That's what I think this verse says. The crucifixion plan itself. And I think by extension, being saved by grace comes from that. But in this verse, grace is generalized. It's like grace was made available to everybody. It was not specific because Jesus' sacrifice is open to everyone. Whether it's now or in the future, we believe that is a generalized thing. And I think the definition of goodwill through God's benevolence, he did that, I feel fits very well with that. Now, when God's charis is directed toward a group of people or individuals, like he kind of like a focus, laser beam of charis, you could call it, I feel like the word gains the connotation of gaining favor. So his general benevolence, and he puts that on you, you've got favor, of gain favor with God. And so consider Luke 1:30. And this is Gabriel. I believe it's Gabriel. Anyway, I forgot what angel came to Mary. And it's Luke, this is starting in verse 28. And having come in, the angel said to her, obviously Mary, rejoice, highly favored. And that's charis, based on the word charis, highly favored one. The Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women. But when she saw him, she was troubled. And then he told her, hey, don't be afraid, Mary, for you have found charis with God, found favor. To me, this shows that God's goodwill and was focused on Mary. And that and I wouldn't say she earned the right to be, Jesus' earthly mother, but she did deserve it due to her outstanding character. I can't imagine that God would have chosen anybody less than an outstanding character person to be Jesus' caretaker while, growing up. 1 Peter 2:19, and this is the New American Standard. For this finds favor, charis, if for the sake of consciousness toward God, a person endures grief while suffering unjustly. But what credit if you, when you sin or treated harshly, you endure it with patience? But if you do what is right and you suffer patiently, this finds charis with God. And I feel that finds favor. So there, that I feel pretty strongly that connotation of focused benevolence is like favor. I think these show that God is pleased with that person. He feels good about them. You've done something good, like, well done, my child. Now, two more examples, verses of God's focused goodwill. Acts 4:33. And with great power, the apostles gave witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And great grace was upon them all. And that's talking about the community of believers on the day of Pentecost. So God focused his benevolence, if you want to say, on those people. And in Luke 2:40, and the child, speaking of Jesus, grew and became strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Now, the word also had a little bit more mundane meaning in just asking for a favor. Hey, would you do me a favor? And one of the examples of that is in Acts 25:9. And this is, I'll just read it. But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, Archelaus, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? So that was more of a simple use. And I think showing somebody favor and, hey, doing me a favor, I could see how those could be related connotations. So another of my categories is gift. Now, charis is not the main word for gift. There are two other words that's used a whole lot more, but it is implied to be a gift several times and actually used as a gift very obviously in a couple places. And one of those is 1 Corinthians 16:3. And this is Paul speaking to the Corinthian church. Now concerning the collection for the saints, I will send the person you select to bear your gift to Jerusalem. And that gift is charis in that sense. And I feel like gift, the way it seemed like a natural expansion of the same connotation, when you give somebody, it's usually out of your goodwill. And this gift here was out of their goodwill, helping the other brethren in Jerusalem. So charis is used in the context of being given to people, like Paul said, the grace given to me and that kind of thing. And so these, I feel like, imply that charis is a gift, or he's viewing it as a gift. For example, Romans 12:3. And it's just simple. I'll read just this first part. For I say, through the grace given to me. Another example is Galatians 2:9. And when James, Cephas, and John perceived that the grace that had been given to me, now this is obviously Paul talking, they sent me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go to the Gentiles and they circumcised. So the elders of the church at Jerusalem had perceived, and I would say the gift that God had imbued Paul with, and Barnabas, they could see God's favor on them, I feel like, is the gift that was given. So in Ephesians 3:7 supports that point of view. Ephesians 3:7, of which I, again, Paul, became a minister according to the gift of the grace of God. So here he's using a different word for gift, a gift of the charis of God given to me by the effective working of his power. Now, this next verse I'm going to read shows that this gift of grace does manifest itself in different ways for different people. And this is Romans 12:6. Having then gifts differing according to the grace, charis, that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion. Then it goes on to list some other things you can do. Now, Peter seconds that concept in 1 Peter 4:10. And this is the New American Standard. As each one has received a special gift, which that's the word charisma, employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the multifaceted grace of God. And that last word is charis of God. So this indicates that this is there's differences in how that he calls it multifaceted. Now this last point also includes a concept of paying it forward, as does Ephesians 4:29. So let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but there's any good word for edification according to the needed moment, say that, so that it will give grace, charis, to those who hear. So how do we give grace? I mean, it's not a tangible thing you can just hand somebody, right? I think part of the idea is that a good attitude can be contagious. In this sense, I think charis is talking about reflecting an upbeat, godly attitude. Another verse that gives this connotation of charis is Colossians 3:16. Let the word of Christ dwell richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns, singing with grace in your hearts. I think that is like reflected benevolence or reflected good attitude from God being shown through people. So I had mentioned about, I thought that the natural outreach of, I don't know what word, but the natural moving to the word gift, I think the same thing is for the word thanks. We offer our thanks as an expression of our good attitude toward a gift we've received. And charis is translated as thanks a couple of times. And Romans 6:17 is one of those examples. But God be thanked, and thanked comes from the word charis in that sense. That you are the servants, that you were, not that you are, that you were the servants of sin. But you have chosen, but you have obeyed from the heart the form of doctrine which was delivered to you. And then also in 1 Corinthians 15:57. So 1 Corinthians 15:57. But thanks, charis, be to God, which gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So here's a complete aside. Well, not complete aside. An aside, let's just say. In researching this topic, I wondered what the Spanish translation would say there. And they agree with calling it thanks. Their translation also thanks. But as I think everybody here probably knows, thanks for Spanish is gracias. And it says gracias a Dios. Well, it dawned on me when I saw that the Spanish words for grace and thanks are practically identical. Gracias and gracia. Grace is gracia. And that's no coincidence. They come from the same Latin root, which supports my theory about what it means. But we have a similar, but not really, because that's Latin and we're talking about Greek. But we have a similar concept in English. It occurred to me, and it's kind of like all dawned on me somewhat recently. It's like, man, you're this old and you didn't realize this. When we talk about giving a blessing or saying thanks for a meal, we don't do that much in the South, but it's referred to as saying grace in a lot of parts of the country. So in that connotation, it means exactly the same as saying thanks. Now, I have two final connotations of charis, and I'll go ahead and say this first one doesn't fit neatly with my definition. But it is used in the phrase under grace. Charis is used in the phrase as in under grace. So Romans 6:13. Do not present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to God as being alive from the dead. For sin will not have dominion over you, for you are not under law, but under charis. Another similar verse is for John 1:17. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So, grace in these two verses, I feel like, or the explanation I'm given, is that it characterizes the Christian era, starting with Jesus, where grace is the defining characteristic rather than law being the defining characteristic. Not as if truth and grace didn't exist throughout mankind. I mean, obviously, God's favor was on Israel in bringing them, the whole time, pretty much, out of Egypt and all of Jacob's descendants. But anyway, that's how I feel like that fits. Paul also contrasts grace versus works a number of times, and I'll give a couple examples. So Romans 4:4. Now to him who works, the wages are not counted as charis, grace, but as debt. Now here, I feel like this verse I've understood from preparing this message more that if I've learned anything, I think it was on this one verse. And the reason is, if you think of charis as a divine gift, it makes perfect sense in this verse. To who him works, those are wages. Wages are not a gift, they're earned. And I think that's the point Paul is making. Charis is a gift, you don't earn it. And you can't by working or keeping the law. And a similar thing in Romans 11:5. Even so, then at this present time, there's a remnant according to the election of grace. And if by grace, then it is no more of works. Otherwise, grace is no more grace. But if it be of works, then it is no more grace. Otherwise, work is no more work. What he's kind of saying is almost a tautology. If you earn it, a gift is not a gift. If it's given to you, wages are not a wage. Is what I think he's saying here. So, what is my definition of grace? I'll conclude with this. I would say that has the primary definition of being a favorable attitude or goodwill. Most of the time in the Bible, it is talking about God's goodwill. When this goodwill is concentrated on individuals,